Good morning. Today is Tuesday, April 13th. It's 10:17 a.m. and this is a meeting of the Senate Natural Resources and Energy Committee. We're going to have an interesting week this week. We're doing some bits and pieces on bills that are still in development or under consideration. And we're also going to have visits from 3 commissioners at ANR plus TJ Poor, who I'm not sure of his exact title, a director maybe at Department of Public Service, talking about long-term planning. We've had some conversations about a once in a generation funding opportunity that's coming through in the form of a state budget surplus plus ARPA money plus an infrastructure bill this fall and possible even federal specific earmarked appropriation. So we're asking all these folks in to talk to us about how they are planning for this sort of cascade of funds coming over that and how to prioritize over the next 1, 3, 5 years. Because in the case of all these operating areas, in the time I've been here, we've never had the opportunity to really plan for growth and programming in a substantial way like this before. So, but meanwhile, we have S109. There continued to get edits. I got an edit back from Department of Public Service correcting a figure that's in the bill. And I'd also asked Ms. Chakowski to work with Ms. Barrett over in JFO to help us look at language that deals with the being able to put monies into our energy savings fund, but replace it with federal dollars when those opportunities come up. And then to provide some opportunity for the legislature, if possible, to be engaged with decisions on the allocations to that fund when we're not in session. I'm not sure that that's possible, but it was a question I wanted to ask, especially since I think some of those funds may reside in there for 2 years or more before they're fully allocated. And with that, I'd like to turn to Ms. Chakowski to ask for a walkthrough on the edits since the last time we looked at 109.
Sure. So, Jude, may I please be a co-host? Today on the website, posted under my name, is the latest draft. I'm calling it 5.1 because this is a little unusual. Your committee doesn't actually have possession of this bill currently. It's in Senate Appropriations, but there are edits, as the chair just mentioned, based on information from the Public Service Department. Nope, that wasn't it. Sorry. Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties at the moment. Okay. Can you see the bill on the screen?
Yes, ma'am. Draft 5.1.
Okay. So as Senator Bray just mentioned, in section 1, there is a change. So you may recall this is updating the language that currently exists in 10 VSA 581. This is in the air pollution chapter, but it's establishing a number of goals related to building efficiency and emissions reduction. So the language is proposed to read, it shall be the goals of the state to improve substantially the energy fitness of at least 120,000 housing units and reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 0.15 million metric tons carbon dioxide equivalent by 2031. In the prior draft of this bill, this number was 0.32, I believe. And that number was originally based on information you received from the Energy Action Network a few months ago. And the department had concerns that perhaps that math wasn't the exact figure you were actually looking for.
Yeah, and the original number came from looking at some EAN documentation and then basically extrapolating a figure. And so it was an estimate. The intent always was to get more accurate data, and EAN and the department have continued to talk. I think part of what makes it more complicated than we might think is as we reduce fossil fuel use and through things like beneficial electrification or just more efficient appliances out there that are using fossil fuels, the greenhouse gases, happily enough, also reduce. So the weatherization that we do has less of an impact on greenhouse gas emissions over time. So it needed to be adjusted for to take into account that it's work we want to do, but it has less impact with each passing year if we're burning less fossil fuel to begin with. So that's the explanation behind the math. Thanks.
So the next change is down further in the appropriations section. So that's on page 7, section. Oh, I'm sorry. That's on page 7 in section 5. There's actually there's new language in the Energy Savings Fund statute. So this is the fund that is being proposed to hold all of these weatherization funds before they're dispersed to the individual programs. So I wanted to make sure that this language captures the intent of how that program should work. I am concerned it's a little bit vague. So I did add this one sentence to address I think what the committee was discussing last time. So there's established the Energy Savings Fund, which shall be managed in accordance with the terms of the special fund chapter in Title 32. This fund shall be administered by the Department of Public Service to fund a variety of programs that will increase energy savings. Monies in the fund shall be used solely for energy savings programs and for necessary costs incurred in administering the fund. The department may create programs to be funded, including weatherization and transportation programs. The fund shall be made up of any funds appropriated to or deposited into the fund. The fund shall only be used to fund projects for which federal funds are not currently available. So I wanted to flag that subsection C is from the original draft of this bill, but I'm not sure it still matches the intent of this committee. I'm not sure. There is a lot, this committee has discussed different options in regards to how to use the federal funds that are going to come from the ARPA bill or any potential other funds. So I'm not sure if that language is still relevant. But then also in the next section, in the appropriation section, there are 2 appropriations that I think are for programs that have not yet been created. And it was unclear to me how that was going to work once they had been put into this fund. So once those appropriations have been deposited into this fund, it was unclear to me who was going to be able to draw out those funds. So this language adds the authority for the department to create programs for those appropriations.
Okay. I think, and the best example of that I can think of is when Riley Allen was in with us maybe 2 months ago now, talking about creating the low income renewable energy program, which would basically be solar for lower income Vermonters. But If I'm remembering right, he said that it was mostly at the concept stage back in January timeframe, and that they would be working on it through the summer and plan to actually sort of formally create such a program probably closer to this fall. So, Ms. Schakowsky, this is addressing that kind of a thing, correct? Right? That they can create a program. They don't just have to fund pre-existing programs.
Right, and it is really about what whatever the committee's intent is. It was unclear to me, and I wanted to make sure the committee was aware that it was unclear to me who could draw those appropriations once they went into the fund. So,
okay. Well, if there are no questions, let's keep reading and let's see if it. So far, so good from my point of view, but I don't know if any committee members have questions or comments. Please jump in. Thanks.
Sure. So finally, in the section 6, the appropriation section, last time I was in here, I had brought you a draft and I had removed this intro language because I was not sure if the committee still wanted all of these appropriations to go into the Energy Savings Fund, but it is back in this draft. So in fiscal year 2022, there's appropriated from the general fund $35 million to the Energy Savings Fund established in the prior section as follows. So all of these appropriations are being deposited into the Energy Savings Fund first, and then the appropriate entities will withdraw the funds. So the rest of these appropriations are still the same. $4 million to the Home Weatherization Assistance Program, $4 million to the SEMP program, $9 million to VHFA for weatherization, $5 million to Efficiency Vermont, $2 million to Efficiency Vermont for workforce development initiatives. And then these final two appropriations are still the same, but I again wanted to flag $9 million to be used on the Affordable Community Scale Renewable Energy Program, which shall support the creation of renewable energy projects for low-income Vermonters. So again, I wanted to flag that there's no specific entity here who is administering this program, and I don't know if it exists. So I don't know who's going to create that program. And same with subdivision 7, $2 million to support projects offering innovative methods of financing energy savings measures, including to the meter programs. So again, this is even sort of less specific. I don't know who will be administering that. It will be in the energy savings program, and the department will be able to disperse those funds, but this isn't specific to a specific existing program.
Sure. So by way of editorial comment, that we can double check with the department, and actually Mr. Poor is in later this week. Maybe it's tomorrow. I forget which day. Yeah, it's tomorrow. So we can double check on the Affordable Community Scale Renewable Energy Program, just for an update to make sure that that's still under development, or hear about the timeline. The $2 million for sure, in my mind, needs revision. It was before VHFA had come to the conclusion that part of their program for providing incentives, payments for weatherization might well take the form of to the meter billing strategy. So they came to that conclusion after I had asked Ms. Schakowsky to add this provision for to the meter, basically a to the meter pilot. So I think those dollars should flow back to something, to go to something else. And we had, so part of what I wanted to do this week was finish with for the most part, with the committee's discussions. Senator Perchlik, if he's available, will be in this morning to talk about a proposed amendment that he wanted to offer. He talked with us before, and I'd asked him to take his ideas and carry them further in the form of language we could look at. So we'll hear from him, if not today, another day this week. And I know that I've talked to Senator Westman before about support for counseling, increased counseling services available to help run, I believe it's the Mileage Smart program on a statewide basis rather than just through 2 of the 5 community action agencies. So there's at least 2 other proposals out there for opportunities for funding, and wanted to put them back on the table and hear from the rest of the committee about any priorities that you might have that are not yet addressed by this package of funding. And then meanwhile, since we drafted all this, the ARPA money arrived, and those are all being proposed as supplements on top of this funding package. So Senator Westman, do you have any thoughts?
I was just going to mention that when the secretary came in on Friday, she indicated that 21 million of the ARPA funds they were recommending for weatherization on top of, I think what she said was on top of this.
Right.
And I was just going to question number 6. Wasn't the proposal from the administration 10 million for community scale energy programs?
It was.
It was. And so if we can use ARPA money for some of these other items, would we not want to put that back up to 10 million? Because I think the community scale has to be, so far we haven't found that we could put federal money toward that. So would we not suggest that we reorganize the weatherization 21 million to some of the other areas and then bump that back up a little?
Sure. And to remind us all, the Affordable Community Scale Renewable Energy Program was 10, and we took $1 million from it and $1 million from the SEMP fund in order to get the $2 million for a to the meter pilot. So since the 9 that's going to VHFA already covers to the meter, the 2 could just flow back to where it came from, or and then there's also the opportunity, because of the 21, to think about shifting some money to things left unfunded, like we had talked about increasing Mileage Smart, which is a little out of the scope of the focus at the moment on weatherization. But earlier on, we talked about, can we make more progress on transportation, because it is the biggest source of emissions. So it makes sense to, I'm interested in hearing from the committee if people are interested in going back to that piece that we, for the most part, pushed, whatever, reluctantly to the back burner, knowing that next January he would be able to come back to it. So any thoughts on doing more related to transportation?
I just say, I like the idea of doing more for transportation, and I would, the community solar, I like the idea of that too. So both of those.
We can also double check with the department. My sense is that there's the State Energy Management Program, the SEMP, that there was a lot of interest in, because of it being opened up to municipalities, that there's a lot of municipal interest in being able to do that work. So the read I got from the department was that although it was a big jump from roughly 1 to 5 million, that because they're expanding who's eligible, that there was demand for those dollars. Okay, so we can resort on those two. And double check with Ms. Winter. She made a proposal for if we were going to expand the ability of them to do outreach for the Mileage Smart program, making it statewide rather than just 2 community action agencies. Mileage Smart being the program that lets you get a used vehicle that's 40 mpg or better. So sort of trading up if you're not able to afford to go all the way to an EV, or it's not a good fit for your family, whatever. So I'll double check. My recollection is that it was a budget request, if we were to expand that, of roughly $500,000. And here comes Senator Perchlik. So that's good timing. Before we take up Senator Perchlik's proposal, Ms. Barrett's with us this morning. So I had asked Ms. Chakowski to reach out to her and JFO for their expertise on how do you deal with putting provisions in that let you replace dollars, state dollars, with federal dollars, et cetera, or how do we have opportunities to influence monies once allocated into something like the Energy Savings Fund. So I don't know if you have anything you want to share with the committee, or you've already worked with Ellen, and so it's already baked into what we're looking at.
I have not already worked with Ellen. Just we've been on the Senate appropriations side. Obviously, the governor put his proposal on ARPA down at the end of last week.
Right.
And then the House budget passed with many of these component pieces in it, not in the Energy Savings Fund as a sort of umbrella construct, but direct appropriations that are similar to the appropriations that you have in this bill coming out of the fund. The big difference is that the House bill, many of the pieces are from the ARPA state fiscal relief pot. So that's the $1 billion pot in ARPA. The one piece that they didn't put over, and they did in a slightly different number, they did a $10 million general fund transfer. They created this revolving fund for the municipal piece. And they couldn't use ARPA because you can't use ARPA money, the state fiscal money, for a revolving loan fund. So they seeded that fund with $10 million of general fund in their construct. And that's in H 439, the budget bill.
So it's basically the SEMP, but instead of funding it with direct allocations, you're creating a revolving loan fund for the same parties to draw on.
For the municipal parties to draw on.
Municipal parties, okay.
Yeah, and so that's what's in the House passed budget bill. And then they're slightly different on they have a transfer into the Clean Energy Development Fund of $10 million from ARPA funds for projects to be determined by a given committee. It's not specified, what yours is more sort of directly the community solar piece, and they have it. The governor did the same. He did a transfer into the Clean Energy Development Fund for the community solar piece. The House budget bill language is not that specific. It's simply the transfer of money with this language that says this particular committee will determine, what are the eligible projects. So it's a very different sort of how the money goes into the Clean Energy Development Fund in their construct. How and when it comes out is less clear.
Okay. And did they replace the community scale affordable renewable energy? I mean, that was the governor's, as described to us, basically something like 6 solar arrays. designated to provide power to low-income Vermonters. That is not in 439.
It's not specified. It's simply putting the money into the Clean Energy Development Fund and saying to be determined what projects, essentially.
Okay.
Is what the language in the House bill says, the budget bill.
Okay. We'll have to find out what changed, why, I don't know if they're any less committed to doing that other, the solar projects, or it's just a different way of managing the money. But maybe Senator Perchlik knows from the other hat he wears as a member of the department. Okay.
And so that was just to give you the sort of the summary of the House budget bill pieces. The DCF weatherization, the VHFA, the two pieces in Efficiency Vermont, those are identical dollar amounts. They're just a different source of funding. Yeah. And there's not your construct of this umbrella fund in the House construct. But the one thing I wanted to sort of step away is the balancing of which fund sources you apply. The governor's proposal is additive. He had pieces in the general fund, and his allocation of the ARPA fund is on top of that. That's not necessarily where either the House or the Senate will be, because obviously the House budget uses ARPA in different ways. The governor's construct allocated all of it, not allocating for things that were priorities on the House side. There are priorities in terms of the House budget on the general fund side, and I think some of those are going to be similar on the Senate side. So I would caution you to assuming that what the governor had in general fund and what the governor is proposing in ARPA is what will be available in total for allocation, because there are other competing demands on ARPA that are not recognized in the governor's proposal, that are priorities on the legislative side at different bodies at the time. So that's just a dynamic that you should be aware of as you're thinking this through.
Sure. In general, as the House, as they have applied federal dollars to things that were being funded with general fund dollars previously, have they then released those state dollars back and applied it to other things like the pension?
So the biggest one is they corralled a large amount of general fund, $150 million, to be reserved for application somewhere down the road when there is some enactable proposals around retirement obligations. Okay. So that is the biggest single sort of swap of the general fund that's going on. That's the House passed proposal. But I do, if I'm reading things correctly, I think there's a desire to at least maintain that reserve on the Senate side for, and it's not, the dollars aren't going anywhere. They would stay in the general fund, but they would be linked to some future actual reform effort.
Okay. All right. I think, I don't know, and maybe we don't know till we're really finalizing the budget, how this all sugares off. But I think in part we were hoping that as federal dollars get swapped into this energy savings fund, that perhaps not all the general fund dollars that we were originally proposing to put in there would be sent back, sort of across the street to be spent other ways. But I'm sure everyone thinks that way about money they're depositing in there.
So the hard part right now is that clearly the governor's construct had general fund dollars. The construct from the House, and I don't necessarily see it going back to general fund dollars. It could on the Senate side, is whether or not you will have much in the way of general fund dollars, or it will be ARPA dollars. And then you also mentioned the pending federal legislation, the infrastructure bill, the jobs bill, which is not a thing yet, right, aside from a concept and a discussion, but it's likely. I mean, it's more likely than it's ever been for an infrastructure package. But we can't appropriate those dollars. We can speak to, the fact that we think they're coming and that, we want our intent to swap out any dollars that we apply from either general fund or ARPA to those dollars to the extent that they are equivalent, that you can apply the whatever form the infrastructure dollars, that federal infrastructure dollars that might be coming, to the extent that you can that they are usable for the things that you have already appropriated ARPA dollars that go unspent. We can write that language. And I'll be honest and say it's not going to be necessarily a seamless piece, but it's clearly the desire to weatherization and climate pieces are a part of, at least on the Biden side, the pieces that would be included in such a bill, along with water and broadband and housing and a lot of things in that bill.
Yeah.
What its end result will be is yet to be known, and how much flows to the state is yet to be known, and how those dollars are, what sort of requirements will come with those dollars, and can they be applied instead of what you might be appropriating in this process for FY22. That's the, we can write that intent language. It's just, writing the intent language does mean that in the budget adjustment process, there's sort of a shepherding and a following and a feedback loop, assuming that we have a federal bill sometime in the fall.
Yeah.
Then in January, there'd be a lot of action to make sure that that's happening, and how you influence that. It's just an open-ended, it's a continual process. It wouldn't be a closed sort of deal.
The estimate I've heard of a likely date for the federal infrastructure bill is passing in October, final passage, something like that. If that is the date, when would, based on your experience, would federal dollars begin to arrive in Vermont?
I several months after that, probably. It depends on what they set up for timing of the funding. I'm assuming that then we are in an FY22, a federal, an FFY22 arrangement, if you're talking about it in October. And so it would depend on how quickly the processes are set up for applying for and receiving the grant dollars. And so that's the, that is a timing issue in terms of, whether or not the experience of this administration with the ARPA funds means that things might be flowing more quickly. I can't say, but the passage of the bill and the time frame for, if Congress puts language in that says dollars shall be distributed or, available, or, sometimes there is a time, like they have done that with the CRF money. They did it with parts of the ARPA money. They've done it, but this, it hasn't quite, Treasury hasn't quite kept up with the timeline, it feels like, yet, even with the ARPA bill. But this money is probably not going to flow through the Treasury on the infrastructure bill. It will probably flow through the federal departments and agencies. And it may flow on existing, what we call CFDA lines, existing grant lines. It may, it depends what those processes around application for the grant, if there's small state minimums and they're just direct, if they're competitive, because it's not a known, there's not an actual draft to look to yet. There will probably start to be drafts of that bill sometime in the late spring, summer. But at that point, I would hate to throw out it, we think the money will flow, if it passes in October, we can start to draw out dollars in January. It could be that, it could be later, but.
Right. Well, it seems like there's a fair amount of uncertainty as to how. In general, in conversation, we've the philosophy we've been talking about, approach, whatever, is more constrained federal dollars before state dollars, and the more constrained dollars before the less constrained dollars.
And that's a great approach, except you have the time dimension
Yes.
of wanting to get dollars out and projects moving.
Right.
And so the dollars that you have sort of trump that desire for, since
Yeah, that's part of why I said philosophy. It's like, okay, this may not be a reality at the end.
Well, I do think that particularly in the wastewater area, which is as I understand it, 100 million of the 150 that the House freed up for pensions, I do think that we can write it in, I hate to use the word waterfall, but waterfall attempt, it says that
I just want, I don't think the governor had a lot of general fund dollars dedicated to water. So when you're talking about the 150 freed up, you're talking about the things he applied general fund to. Yeah.
No, but the House moved out the money from they moved out money that we had dedicated from the dedicated tax. And they used $100 million of state funds to do that. My point really, and that my point of this really is that what I think we can write the bill is say, if it works out and it's appropriate, we can do sort of a waterfall that says we do ARPA funds now, but if that money became available, we'd swap it out for that, for the infrastructure money.
And I think that's true in the broadband, the water, the housing, and the and this weatherization arena. These four sort of major capital intensive type areas.
I think what the House did was they swapped out rooms and meals.
So well, they applied ARPA, $100 million of ARPA, and for 5 years they've swapped out rooms and meals, so the net up to is in a $40 million range. But you get the 100 million up front to do more stuff sooner. I just wanted to caution that's not that particular area doesn't necessarily generate the general fund. That was the pension piece, because that was all the one-time general fund. This was trying to solve the base of the general fund a little bit.
So rooms and meals was generating approximately 12 million a year. Is that
10 million this year, or 10 million projected for 22? So lower year, growing back up to 12 million over the course of that 5 year,
so that's
window.
Roughly 60, and instead they're swapping in 100.
Yeah, so they're plopping in 100 up front and taking out that dedicated. They're redirecting that dedicated revenue to the general fund base for 5 years.
Okay. Well, the long-term sustainable funding of clean water work is a little less long-term, but we'll see. Hold our breath for 5 years. Okay.
But the water area is one area that's very clearly ARPA eligible, ARPA state fiscal relief dollars eligible. Yeah. It's a little less clear on the housing side, and maybe a little less clear on the weatherization side. Although those pieces are definitely desired pieces in the potential federal infrastructure bill. So,
but
I'm trying to remember the phrasing for the federal language on that brought in energy. It might have been, was it energy efficiency, as opposed to saying the word weatherization? Well, we'll see. Anyway. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for helping us sort through the moving money. And I don't know if any of this conversation is already captured in the language that Ms. Chakowski has for the committee to hand back off to appropriations, which will probably make adjustments of its own, but we're trying to get our language as complete and tidy and up to date as possible before handing it back off again.
So I think, I mean, I don't know if Ellen has enough, but to the extent that you have those appropriations out of your energy savings fund, I would, you have it drafted as general fund. I would actually, general fund or ARPA funds, it's more likely going to be ARPA funds than general fund. So that's a change that I would recommend. But if Ellen has enough, we can talk about this intent regarding the federal infrastructure bill. We can work on putting that into your section of language on the appropriations, because that's where you put it.
Well, that would be great. If you, I think the goal is by the end of this week, we probably actually give it to next week. But this week, we would try to have dotted all the I's, crossed the T's, and have it tidied up, including some still pending dollars in terms of how they're to be spent. But we're probably 95% there on that. Okay. So thank you. If you can.
Sure.
With Ms. Chakowski, that'd be great.
Okay, will do.
Thank you. So with that, I'm going to reconnect with Sue Minter and Senator Westman. You've been a liaison to her. I don't know if you are so busy you don't want to do that, or do you want to loop back in with her about the enhancement to the Mileage Smart program, since it seems like there's an opportunity to do a little better work on transportation than we were going to do before the ARPA money arrived.
So why don't I just text her and see if get a time where you and I can talk with her.
Okay. I know that because of earlier conversations, I did ask her to draft, or outline a program. So they have done some work budgeting and figuring out how it would work, et cetera. So there's probably a pretty quick turnaround. Senator Perchlik had to leave and go back to transportation. He's going to come back again, but he requested that before he get here, that Ms. Chakowski walk through his amendment. And I don't know if you have that available and can walk the committee through his proposal.
Sure. So posted on your committee page under my name is an amendment from Senator Perchlik. It's draft 2.2, but it does have his name on it. So I will put it on the screen. So he has requested to sort of amend the language that we were just reviewing with Stephanie. So the first proposals to change some of the language in the appropriation section. So first, in subsection 3, $8 million to VHFA to support housing weatherization statewide. Your committee currently has $9 million. That $1 million is then directed into so the Department of Public Service to Grant Efficiency Vermont for the purpose of developing, in collaboration with the department and interested distribution utilities and other stakeholders, a tariff on the bill to the meter financing program to be financed by VHFA. So this language is taking some of the money that your bill directs specifically to VHFA and has Efficiency Vermont working with the distribution utilities to come up with the program that will then be financed by Efficiency Vermont. Financed by VHFA.
Yeah, so there is a working group already going between Efficiency Vermont, VHFA, the distribution utilities that are all talking about VIPSA. I attend a regular meeting or two on Mondays of this working group. So this is more prescriptive. And I think my understanding is VHFA is planning on using some sort of to the meter approach, but I don't know that it's a tariffed on bill to the meter financing program.
Isn't VHFA going to do the bonding?
So we should have them back in because.
Yeah, but how would this affect their bonding?
Right now, so let's have VHFA come back in. Part of what they're exploring is, can they get more development work done by using the money through something akin to a on the meter or to the meter financing program. But the conversations that they're having with lenders and Efficiency Vermont and the distribution utilities is still very much in development. So my concern is here that this would become prescriptive and might prevent them from doing something that would be the most cost-effective solution. So I think we'll have them come back in, because the precise proposals under discussion have evolved in the last 3 months for the better, actually. They've said that they favor, not surprisingly, broader, more open language that lets them get the most, accomplish the most work with the dollars that they get. And that may or may not involve bonding.
Right. Well, I thought part of the reason they were going to bond is to increase the pot. And I don't know how that all works.
Right. So we'll have them back in to get an update on where they are with what their proposal to spend the 9 is. Okay.
So then down in subdivision 6, so $2 million to the department to give to Efficiency Vermont for the purpose of workforce development initiatives to support expansion of NeighborWorks. So 1 million shall go to NeighborWorks directly, and 1 million shall go to the electric efficiency fund for use by Efficiency Vermont. So that is a slight difference than yours. It's breaking that 2 million into 2 distinct pots.
So on ours, does it, I'm just trying to remember now.
It just stops at on line 11 at program. So it's not, it just says expansion.
Okay, and I think they remember discussion, if it's not in the bill, of NeighborWorks getting $500,000 of the 2, but I don't know that for a fact, so I have to double check. Okay.
Then in subdivision 7, the 8 million goes to the Energy Savings Fund to be used on affordable community scale renewable energy to support the creation of renewable energy projects for low-income Vermonters. So that number is down from 9 in your proposal, but then that 1 million that's been shaved off is added to this new subdivision 8. And in your bill, it's $2 million for this innovative methods, possibly on the bill or something.
Yeah.
But here, there is a new proposal. So $3 million to the Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation to fund the programs established in the next section. So then there's this new language here. So advanced wood heat incentive programs. The Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, in collaboration with the Division of Air Quality and the Department of Environmental Conservation and the Department of Public Service, shall design incentive programs for the installation of advanced wood heating systems and development of the local advanced wood heating market with the $3 million appropriated in this act. The programs at a minimum shall include a stove changeout program for households at or below 120% of the state median household income, a competitive grant program for nonprofit public serving institutions, including schools, hospitals, colleges, libraries, and municipal buildings, to install advanced wood heating systems, and a competitive grant program for advanced wood heating businesses for investment in advanced wood heating fuel supply infrastructure. So this is asking the Department of Forest, Parks, and Rec, with assistance from the Air Quality and the Department of Public Service, to come up with at least 3 specific incentive programs, one for households, one for public institutions, and then one for businesses. These programs shall require compliance with the air quality rules established by the Division of Air Quality. Funds may be used for purchase and maintenance of particulate emission monitoring equipment. Not more than 10% total may be used on program administration, and up to 5% may be used for program design and promotion. So this is an entirely new program that your committee has not contemplated before.
Okay. All right, well, when Senator Perchlik comes back, we can hear his thinking on some of these suggestions. Yeah, I don't know if the committee has any thoughts on the idea of expanding the scope of the bill, which is pretty weatherization centric, to support for, I don't know if it's, I was almost going to say fuel switching or something like that, but it's not necessarily that. It could just be enhancement of existing wood heating systems, like stove swap. I don't know if number 2, that sounds like expanding the chip market, the large boilers, wood-fired chip boilers, which I think there's something like 45 schools in the state burning wood for their heat.
So then finally, there is new language. Senator Perchik is proposing new language in the VHFA powers section of the bill. So your proposal contains this subdivision 23 to develop a program to finance and promote housing weatherization using the funds appropriated. But on page 5, there's 2 new subdivisions related to this. So provide up to 3.5 million of financing using monies appropriated by the General Assembly for the on-build terrace to the meter energy efficiency program that's referenced in the above appropriation section. This program may be financed with funds generated through issuing bonds, notes, and other obligations of the agency, and with funds from other sources obligated through grants or arrangements. Funds appropriated by the state shall benefit households at or below 120% of the state median household income. Any unused appropriated funds shall revert to the general fund if not used within 3 years. The agency shall report to the General Assembly on the programs created under these subdivisions including the loan applications received and the amount, the loans issued and their amounts, the loans defaulted on and their amounts, the average loan amount and term, the estimated energy savings and money savings to be achieved by the projects under these programs, the average project cost, the average energy burden of borrowers, and the average income of borrowers. So this 24 adds some language around the on bill to the meter financing program, and then this adds a reporting requirement.
Okay, so this is saying out of the money that VHFA is getting, up to 3.5 can be used for to the meter. What was the earlier money on to the meter? That's for the design of such a program?
Yes. Let's see, where is it? Yes, so there's 1 million. Yeah, development of the program. And then there's the other 8 million that's going to VHFA for housing weatherization.
Okay, and it has EVT, Efficiency Vermont, leading the development of the program, and then VHFA later on authorized to spend up to 3.5 million financing projects in such a manner, and then reports to follow on the characteristics of those loans and the performance. Okay. All right, so I don't know if the committee has any initial reactions. We still haven't, Senator Perchlik hasn't returned. I don't know if we're going to get him this morning or not. They're doing a final markup on the T-bill, unfortunately, at the same time. But the people most affected by, so if he doesn't come back, we'll schedule him in. Do people have any initial reactions to expanding the clean energy, the new section that's entirely on advanced wood heat? Good idea? Not so great idea? I mean, I don't want to make it more complicated than it is. We also have new dollars arriving on the scene as in the form of ARPA money. So it might be that without reducing our own proposal to date, that it could be enhanced with an advanced wood heat component. Senator McDonald.
But we're putting a lot of money into various places and granting a lot of authority before the rules on how this money should be spent are known. And I find that troublesome. It makes sense to begin to think about this and to contemplate where it might go, but until we have the rules, until we know what the legislature's opportunity is to weigh in on future choices, I'm nervous about.
Okay. Is that
no disrespect to the careful and thoughtful work that has produced what we listened to this morning. Just
so if I just want to make sure I'm hearing you right. It sounds a little bit like, while we've vetted quite thoroughly the proposal that's in our bill already as it currently stands, but these additional changes that could rely on new funds coming in, that it would be of concern to do any of the new things without knowing that money is actually certain to be arriving, certain to be eligible for those uses. Is that fair?
That's our job.
Yeah.
And if we're not here and we delegate that to someone, then we're responsible for what has happened, whether it's turns out to have been wise and thoughtful, well spent, or frittered away, or ill conceived.
Okay.
We're responsible.
Senators McCormick and Westman, you're both appropriations veterans. So any thoughts about this sort of relatively late proposals to take money and move it around and maybe even use some more new money?
I'll defer to Rich since he's still on the committee.
I'm not opposed to doing something for advanced wood heat. I'm, you know, we'd have to figure out the dollars to do that. I'm not opposed. What I'm not sure of in this is this the best bang for the buck that we could do with this money? Where in the pecking order does wood heat fit in that? And I'm just not sure. Maybe what this is as we get more delineation on the federal money, and that maybe we could use some of the federal money for that. And maybe that's something that is because the federal money lasts for 3 years. Maybe we start it in January, but I just don't. I don't know where the bang for the buck to do advanced wood heat, and we'd have to figure out the dollars. But I'm definitely not opposed to looking at this.
Right. Well, and
I think
back up at the very top of our own bill, it names the goals of this bill, at least as currently formulated, which is weatherize 120,000 homes and reduce
Yep.
emissions. So wood heat doesn't have anything to do with the weatherizing of 120,000 homes. It could make a contribution on the emission reduction side.
Yep. Right.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're sort of, it's like we're going on a trip without a roadmap here, in that we're planning for a future. We don't know what's there. We don't know what's going to be happening. We're going home. Well, we're already home. We're figuratively going home
Yes.
in a couple of weeks, and stuff is going to be happening for months before we come back. And so I think the uncertainty, and so to answer Mark's concern about our deferring to others, I think the decisions are going to have to be made. And I don't think we can just say, well, we don't know what the future holds, so we're not going to make decisions. I think we have to sort of, we're gambling here, and we're gambling with the taxpayers' money, or, well, yeah, federal money still comes from taxpayers. Indebted money, so we're gambling with future generations' money. But I don't know what else we can do. But the other thing is, my thoughts here are not what we're considering doing. I'm fine with. I'm looking at Ellen's work, and it's good. And I kind of like Perchlick's suggestions. What I am most concerned with is what we're not doing yet. And that's not a complaint. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. I want to understand this in the context of the whole energy picture. This is what we're doing so far, that we do have more to do. How does the chair and how does the committee envision the comprehensive energy package that we will be? What are we going to be doing over the summer, if anything? What do you envision coming back to in January? Where is the full agenda right now?
Sure. Great. Well, great questions. Happy to take respond and hear from others too, in terms of, so we've laid out that one way of describing what we're doing with S109 is doubling and doubling again the amount of weatherization going on in the state of Vermont, and to get to 120,000 more homes in a decade. So that's and that's our biggest bite at the heretofore really not very well addressed thermal load issue. The other big piece we all know is the transportation piece, and there's one of the things I think we'll look at when we come back is to what degree can we do something similar. We're setting up a 10-year plan on making a major change to weatherization and fossil fuel use for heating. To what degree does that become a model for doing something similar on transportation? And then there's a modest amount of money going over to things currently like mileage smart, helping people get higher mileage internal combustion engine cars. Replace your ride, which takes that a step further and helps people get into electric vehicles. But that I really think is the major lift to be doing next year, is to be adding a transportation leg to the stool. It's like we're making some progress with it this year. There's a lot of emphasis in ARPA and in the infrastructure bill on things like charging infrastructure. We already have the highest number of charging stations per capita. I don't know when we hit the law of diminishing returns on that one, but I think the biggest opportunity that I see is for us to improve the fleet. As Senator McDonald points out, if we don't start improving the fleet, we have those cars on the road for 11 years or more. And that means helping people get into EVs, or at least leaving the greatest gas guzzlers, taking some of those off the road. So I don't know if that adds up to an answer or not to your question. There's one other piece that there's another work group out there Rich Cower is leading, and it's on a clean heat standard, which I think our bill actually anticipates. You might remember that one of the metrics we were using when we were still talking about a thermal energy benefit charge or something like that was how much emissions was associated with any kind of fuel. And just like we have an RES, there are folks who are thinking that we could have a clean heat standard, and there'd be an obligation to use cleaner fuels over time, lower emitting fuels over time. So there's quite a lot going on. It's not, especially with S109 flowing into the budget, we're not as visible as normally a bill like 109 would be, where there'd be a lot more visibility and sort of notoriety or whatever as it came to the floor and got discussed. Instead, we're doing all the homework and building it into the budget. I don't know if that leaves you with other questions, or if other people see things they want to add to the work list. And between now and next fall, so there's a workforce in order to make sure that we can get this weatherization work done, or to maximize the chances for success. There's a workforce group established led by Efficiency Vermont. We're going to meet with them in June, and they're going to come back with a report in October. There's a counseling and outreach group that's meeting, led by Office of Economic Opportunity. We'll meet with them in June, and they'll be back with a report in October. And then I'll be asking the pro tem to allow us to have several meetings to dig into funding further, because so far we've been relying on the injection of these one-time dollars, where there's a lot of interest in really figuring out how to make to the meter work out. But we haven't come back yet and met with folks on, we've talked about it, gotten some positive signals, but we're a little early on the game for our Medicare Medicaid waiver with CMS allows for, there have been waivers that allowed for Medicaid dollars to support low-income Vermonters with poor indoor air quality to have weatherization be part of a medical expenditure to improve the quality of their life at home. And that's already been done on a prototype basis in Vermont, up in the Northeast Kingdom and down in Rutland County. But it was more ad hoc and not part of our ongoing funding. And then there's also traditional bonding, which we've not really come back to explore. And then just to add even more uncertainty, but if we're meeting, when we meet, I should say, we'll know more about the infrastructure bill. And there's the possibility that by the time we come back in January, there'll be another tranche of money in the infrastructure bill that fits into our program of work here. And I heard from a member of the administration that it's their current understanding that those infrastructure dollars may have a 10-year timeline for spending. So that could be very helpful to us. So we get a 10-year timeline, a 3.5-year timeline, and a current budget timeline all going at the same time. So I don't know if that leaves you feeling like, well,
So that's,
so far, but we have a lot more to do, and what you would move to the top of the list.
I guess that's a future, future conversation like this week. I don't have a quick answer. I just, my sense is, and this is not a complaint, it's just an observation. We have a fairly large package of proposals, and we've sort of been dealing with them ad hoc. And which is good. I mean, that's how you get things done. I wanted, as we're nearing the end of the session, to step back and just look at the whole comprehensive package. So thank you for that, Mr. Chairman.
Sure. Well, we've spent a lot of time in the forest, with the tree by tree by tree lately.
Yes.
Step back out. I would say, the very good news is that we're talking about investing $35 million in weatherization and in clean energy, and that is, usually we've been dealing more like with $1 to $2 million a year. So it's really unprecedented in terms of the scale of the investment.
How much in the end is estimated to do that? The homes that we want to get to?
The grand total over a decade?
Yeah.
I believe the number is, it's north of $1 billion, like 1.1 to 1.3.
Okay.
Although I want to make sure whenever I say that it's, there's a benefit that comes along with it. So the investment may be that side, and the savings that go along with it are, I can't give you the total savings that comes out of that. And it's also private dollars, not just state or federal dollars. If I go way back to January, the reminder for us was that the Efficiency Vermont model, where we've in 20 years invested $658 million as ratepayers, has a net savings of $2.4 billion. So it's been cost effective, and I think that's the kind of investment we're talking about making in weatherization. But the savings get talked about less than the investment. So before we, wrap up, I think it's a good reminder to me to get that bigger picture information together for all of us and for the caucus and Senate. I mean, so the people will know, what are we investing and what are we saving with that investment? Okay. So I don't see Senator Perchlik, unless anyone has something else they'd like to bring up. We're a little ahead, but without our witness, we're somewhat stymied. Anything else anyone wants to put on the table? So we'll be hearing from operating areas about what they're looking at for spending. And I've asked them to, I said, think big picture and think 1, 3, and 5 years, because we've had such tight budgets in A&R that we've not had the chance to say, if we had more money, what would we do with it?
So, Senator Bray,
Yes.
Sue Minter and I together could meet with you at either 4:30 or 5. Does that work for you?
I think 4:30 does. Usually there's a chairs meeting then, but I think it's canceled. Let me confirm that and get back.
Text me back and let me know.
Okay. All right. So with that, we have finished for the morning. Thank you, everybody. And see you in afternoon committees or not.